Let's speak with the transport editor of the London Evening Standard. Ross Lydall is with us. Ross, afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
It's the usual one, this. I mentioned it a second ago to our previous guest, the Gordian knot, the cul-de-sac. How do you solve a strike? I mean, one short answer might be, well, when the Tories aren't in power, there probably won't be as many strikes, but that's another story maybe. At the moment, the government are saying, look, there is over an 8.5% or whatever it is, rise on the table, 8.9 I think it is, on the table. They haven't put that to the members. They say it's not enough, it's an insult, they haven't had a pay rise, it's not in line with inflation, blah, blah, blah. How do we solve this?
Well, I thought one of the most interesting things this morning at Waterloo was, just like your team this morning, I was there as well, waiting for my turn to speak to Mick Whelan. But what was happening while he spent probably an hour and a half being interviewed by various media outlets was there was a constant stream of passengers going behind him, passing by. People were pouring out of Waterloo, not like a normal day, to be fair, but this was busier than any other strike day I've seen. Normally on Aslef strike days, I'll go along to Euston or King's Cross station, and they're completely deserted. You might have a cleaner and possibly a couple of pigeons on the forecourt at Euston, but otherwise these stations are empty. There were probably thousands going past each hour. So South Western Railway, to their credit, did a pretty good job today. Only really 4 parts of their network were operating. You had trains coming from Basingstoke, from Guildford and Woking and so on. So this was a little bit embarrassing for Mick Whelan. I said this to him, it doesn't look like your strike is having much effect. He said, well, come on, on a normal day, it would be 20 or 30 times busier, which may be the case. But the problem the union has as well in terms of trying to win over public support is it refuses to put a figure on how much more money it wants. What Mick Whelan said today was, well, we want a cost of living rise. But they've been asking for that for so long, people have forgotten what the RPI rate of interest was, a couple of years ago when this dispute started. So how does it finish? Well, I say to him, why bother now? The government is clearly not giving way. Why not just wait for Keir Starmer, should he then, form the next government? And Mick Whelan's view was, well, we don't want to wait that long. So he said he wanted to strike a deal today if he could, but it really doesn't feel like it's any way close.
And what about these new laws that were supposed to ensure 40% of rail operators can continue, at least 40% of journeys can still continue? I mean, did that come into action today? I mean, you say some trains were moving, even from those areas or those networks that were supposedly on strike. What's the deal there, Ross?
These laws were not used today. What was interesting was I spoke to Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, before Christmas, because at the time, strikes were planned on the London Underground, and it appeared that Sadiq Khan would be the first sort of rail boss, because he obviously runs transport for London and the London Underground, to have the opportunity to use these new laws. As you say, they require 40% of services to run. In the end, Sadiq Khan said that these laws were not fit for purpose, and he actually then found £30 million to essentially bail out the RMT union rather than Aslef to prevent the tube strikes. So then the ball rather moved into the court of the train operating companies, all these sort of 14, 15 firms affected by Aslef's action this week. LNER, which runs the high-speed long-distance trains on the East Coast Main Line, between London, King's Cross, York, Newcastle, up to Edinburgh and Aberdeen, it did say it was going to use these minimum strike regulations, but then backed away, because as soon as it sort of indicated it was preparing to use the new laws, Aslef said, oh, hang on a minute, well, we're going to have 5 more strike days on your network then. So it ended up with the train bosses being too frightened to use the new laws, and the government being pretty miffed, shall we say, that the train companies weren't going to use them. And of course, it was ironic that it was LNER, which is essentially controlled by the Department for Transport anyway, that backed away from using the government's own laws.
Indeed. We'll speak again. Ross, thanks for your time. Ross Lydall.